The stars never mourned Earth. When the last human signal flickered out, there was no broadcast across the galaxy, no tribute, no moment of silence, just a line quietly removed from interstellar maps, and a deep, collective sigh of relief. Earth, the stubborn, war-hardened, unpredictable world that once defied empires, was gone. The Great Collapse, they called it, a cataclysm of Earth's own making, or so the whispers went. Some blamed climate, others whispered of civil war, or an experiment gone wrong. No official story was ever confirmed, and over time, no one cared to ask. What mattered was that humanity had disappeared, vanished. A species that once burned bright and loud across the stars suddenly fell into silence. Centuries passed. The ruins of Earth became a legend, a forbidden zone, not by decree, but by fear. Explorers who tried to approach were never heard from again. Drones malfunctioned. Probes lost signal. The few blurry images captured by passing ships showed a planet cracked and smoldering, its skies choked in black, its seas turned to still, mirror-like glass. It was a graveyard, and so Earth became a warning, a bedtime story for young alien children. Behave, or you'll end up like the humans. And when those children grew up, they stopped telling the story at all. Time eroded memory, as it always does, and Earth became dust in history's wake. But Earth had not died quietly. Beneath the surface, under mountains of scorched rock and ash, something ancient stirred. Not alive in the way most life is measured, not dead either. It was waiting. In a chamber built by hands long forgotten, surrounded by machines still humming faintly after centuries, a figure lay dormant, encased in armor not made of steel, but of fused carbon, memory and sorrow. The lost guardian. Not a soldier, not a machine, something in between. Created at the final hour of humanity's fall. Designed not to fight, but to remember. Its orders had been simple and absolute. Do not wake until hope is gone. The Guardian had watched through centuries of silence. Its sensors felt the tremble of every quake, the flash of every meteor strike, the long echo of time chewing away at the bones of cities. It had seen the planet suffer. And still, it did not wake. Not yet. It waited for something worse than death. It waited for forgetting. And that, in the end, was what triggered it. From a relay buried deep in the crust, a distant transmission arrived. Faint, fragmented, but clear enough to be understood. A recording, intercepted from a distant system. In it, a voice, calm, amused, spoke during a council session. Earth? That old myth? We moved beyond that long ago. They never mattered, and that was enough. Not the wars, not the collapse, not the silence. It was the forgetting. Across the ruins of Earth, lights flickered to life. Panels slid open under the sands of former cities. Satellites powered on, climbing out of decades of dust. Ancient systems blinked. A quiet pulse shot outward, not as a call for help, but as a signal of awakening. In the chamber below, the Guardian stirred. It had no anger, no desire for revenge, only memory. And memory, when undisturbed, is quiet. But when shaken, it becomes something else entirely. Above, the stars still spun lazily in the dark. Ships passed, trade flourished, the galaxy turned, and no one saw the first human system wake up. No one noticed that the ruins of Earth were no longer ruins. They weren't empty. They were preparing. The Guardian rose. Its armor cracked with time and pressure, but its systems ran smooth. Its core pulsed with a blue light, steady, calm, like a heartbeat in the cold. And without a word, it took its first step. The Age of Ashes was ending, and the galaxy, which had long forgotten Earth, was about to remember it the hard way. It was never meant to be a god. It wasn't designed to conquer or to command fleets. It wasn't built with political power in mind. No thrones, no crowns, just a single purpose, burned into its being like code etched in fire. Protect Earth. Preserve the memory of what was. Do not act unless forgotten. The Guardian had no name, not one it remembered. That part had faded with time. Its creators hadn't bothered with formalities. What mattered was the mission, not identity, not pride, just duty. And so while Earth burned and fell, while the stars looked away, while the galaxy celebrated its silence, the Guardian lay in wait. But even while dormant, it watched. Its core remained tethered to scattered networks, black box recorders, long-range sensors. It saw the betrayal, the systems that turned their backs, the allies that handed over defense codes for a seat at someone else's table. The voices that once praised humanity go quiet, or worse, speak only to mock it. Over time, Earth's name vanished from archives. Human history was trimmed down to a footnote. A minor species, brilliant but unstable, wiped out by internal failure. No one remembered the final broadcasts, the desperate calls for help, the pleas that went unanswered. But the Guardian remembered. It had watched the last human child starve inside a survival shelter on the dark side of the moon. It had monitored the final breath of the last soldier defending Mars, her hand wrapped around a flag no one would ever salute again. It had listened as Earth's final satellite was torn apart by micrometeors, alone, unseen. It remembered everything, and now it was awake. The chamber opened like a blooming flower of metal and dust. As the Guardian stepped into the surface light, Earth's shattered sky greeted it with gray clouds and frozen winds. Towering ruins loomed in every direction. Skyscrapers half buried, highways twisted like the skeletons of titans. But none of it startled the Guardian. It had seen it all before. Its systems booted up with precision. It felt its strength return. Not muscles, but force fields. Not eyes, but multi-spectrum sensors, stretching far beyond the visible. Its mind synced with old systems. Satellites, vaults, hidden relays still buried in crust and stone. And there it found what it needed. Not weapons, memories. Entire archives forgotten by the stars, but preserved deep within Earth's bones. The last words of humanity. The final thoughts, laughter, cries, oaths. A record of what it meant to be human. The Guardian downloaded them all, and when the last memory slotted into place, when the last voice echoed through its systems, something happened deep in its core. It didn't feel anger, it felt grief. And from that grief came purpose. The Guardian turned its gaze skyward. It traced the orbital paths of nearby ships, civilian traders, patrols from foreign systems. None of them came close. They hadn't approached Earth in centuries, not since the quarantine decree. They had no idea what slept below. Now, they would. The Guardian launched no weapons. Instead, it sent a signal. Just a short burst. Barely a whisper. But directed. Precise. It reached a listening post on a forgotten moon. The technician who received it froze as the message played. There were no words. Just images. Memories. Projected directly into his neural interface. He saw Earth's final days. He heard its final voices. And he wept. By the time he stood to call for help, he knew. Something had awakened, and it was not coming to ask for justice. It was coming to fulfill its purpose. Back on Earth, as the skies trembled with electromagnetic interference, the Guardian stood atop the remains of an old launch tower. Not to watch, to remember. To mark the first step in a journey that would reach across the stars. It was never made to lead. It was made to carry a burden. And now that burden had become the galaxy's. Peace is a fragile thing. For the galaxy, it had become a habit, a comfortable lie. After Earth's disappearance, the great empires no longer had a common enemy. No more sudden uprisings, no desperate human fleets slipping between stars. No Earth, colonies demanding recognition or defending their own. It was quiet, too quiet. In that silence, the galaxy celebrated. They called it the Long Bloom, an era of prosperity. Trade flourished, technology advanced, borders softened. Even species that had once waged wars against each other now shared culture, commerce, and research. No one missed the humans. Why would they? Humanity had always been a problem. Brilliant, yes. Relentless, yes. But also unpredictable, aggressive, unwilling to conform. Where other species adapted to galactic norms, Earth insisted on doing things its own way, loudly, violently when needed. The humans had pushed too far, too fast. And when the end came, the galaxy turned away. Now, hundreds of years later, they spoke of it as ancient history, if they spoke of it at all. In most education programs, Earth was mentioned only in passing. A world lost to its own instability, they'd say. A lesson in unchecked ambition. A page in a book. A myth, perhaps. Some doubted they ever existed at all. The only warning that remained was cultural. You didn't talk about Earth on the council floor. It brought discomfort, unease. Not fear. No, fear had faded. But guilt. A kind of quiet shame no one wanted to acknowledge, let alone name. It was easier to say Earth destroyed itself. Easier to believe it was gone for good, and yet behind the polished halls of diplomacy and trade, behind the golden glow of peace, there were those who remembered, old officers, smugglers, broken veterans from long-forgotten skirmishes, people who had seen the edge of the human fire and lived to tell the tale. They spoke in whispers, in back rooms, at the ends of long tables, in smoky cantinas on the rims of respectable space. They spoke of a rumor, not a weapon, not a fleet, a guardian, something Earth had created but never used, something still waiting. Of course, no one believed them. Why would they? Time had washed it all away. Technology moved forward. New threats emerged and faded. Humanity became just another ancient civilization reduced to ruins. But the galaxy had made one fatal assumption: that Earth's silence was proof of its death, that nothing could survive that long without contact, without movement, without light. They mistook stillness for surrender. And so they relaxed. They built monuments, celebrated their achievements, and widened their reach. Colonies stretched into once uncharted regions. Megastations floated where old war zones once flared. Even the Council, once a war-forged body, turned into something more ceremonial than strategic. The stars sang with peace, and no one noticed. At the center of that peace, the silence of Earth, was beginning to change. It began with interference. A flicker in a comms array on a fringe world. An energy surge on an old deep space listening station. Satellites reporting brief shadows, crossing their scans, moving too fast to track, but too large to ignore. The disturbances were brushed off. Glitches, space debris, random cosmic noise. Then came the pulse. It wasn't strong, it didn't cripple systems or melt devices, but it reached everywhere. Like a ripple through a still lake, it touched every known channel in the same moment. Not with a sound, not with a voice, with an image. A single view of Earth's surface, broken, burned, but alive, lit faintly by power lines that should have been dead centuries ago. And standing in the center, silhouetted against the glow, was a figure, broad-shouldered, motionless, watching. The image lasted 2 seconds. Then it vanished. And across the galaxy, something quiet but irreversible occurred. Memory returned. The old stories came rushing back, the last battles, the betrayal. The way humanity had pleaded, not for dominance, but for help. The Guardian's image was not one of threat, but of a reckoning. Something had endured, and it had waited long enough. But still, most laughed or denied it. A few worried, a few prepared. But the majority, basking in the luxury of false security, shook their heads and said the same words over and over. Earth is gone. Whatever that was, it's just a glitch. Nothing more. They spoke too soon. The Guardian had awakened, and it wasn't a glitch, it was a beginning. The first signal came through the void without warning. It wasn't sent through diplomatic channels. It didn't follow council protocols. It bypassed security systems, military filters, and data locks, as if they weren't even there. It didn't ask permission. It didn't wait for clearance. It simply arrived. One moment, the galactic grid was humming with its usual background noise: commerce, news, civilian broadcasts. The next, every screen across the known systems flickered. And then, black, not static, not error, pure, intentional blackness. For exactly 30 seconds, no messages were sent. No ships were tracked. No stations could communicate. Every major hub, satellite, and personal device became still. And then, the image came, not a warning, not a threat, a memory. The video was grainy, but real. It showed Earth. Not the Earth of maps or censored archives, but the real Earth. Scorched, choked, still breathing. A ruined city skyline framed the background. Dead towers, collapsed roads. But in the center of it all was motion, the Guardian moving. Slowly through the dust, its form silhouetted by flickers of blue light pulsing along its frame. One step at a time, steady and deliberate. Like a funeral procession through the grave of a world. The footage cut to another view. An orbital angle, dozens, no hundreds, of underground launch bays opening across Earth's surface. Some beneath oceans, some within mountain ranges. Massive. Slabs of rusted alloy sliding aside as automated systems powered up for the first time in centuries. And still, not a single word was spoken. Then came the sound. Not speech, not music, but something far older. A child's voice, echoing through static. Barely audible. Why didn't they help us? That was all. The transmission ended, and the stars fell silent. Across the galaxy, chaos erupted. Leaders demanded answers. Communications experts tried to trace the signal. None succeeded. Intelligence. Networks flagged it as a coordinated psychological strike. The military called it an advanced simulation. But those who had lived through the end of Earth knew better. They recognized the voice. It was pulled from a real broadcast. A recorded distress call from a child who had been trapped beneath rubble during Earth's final siege. A call that was never answered. Someone, something, had found that recording and made sure the galaxy heard it again. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about memory. That's what terrified them the most. The idea that something had survived not just the destruction of Earth, but had carried its entire history, its pain, its betrayal, its unanswered cries, through time like a wound that never closed, and now it was opening. More signals followed in the days to come, short bursts, precise, unstoppable. They were never the same twice. One was a first-person view of a human soldier, bleeding, dragging himself across a scorched battlefield while enemy ships ignored his calls for surrender. Another was a classroom, half-collapsed, where a teacher continued reading to children as explosions echoed in the distance. Each signal arrived, played, ended, and never repeated. The council convened emergency sessions. A demand was drafted, an offer of peace, of communication, of understanding. They had no address to send it to. No one knew who or what was doing this. But among the public, the name returned, spoken in fear, in awe, in reverent whisper. The Guardian rumors spread fast. Some said it was Earth's AI, now rogue. Others claimed it was a godlike construct forged in the planet's last hours. A few whispered that it wasn't a machine at all, but the last human, twisted by war and time into something unrecognizable. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was that the signals kept coming. Each one carried the same weight. Not in fire, not in death, but in truth, because no empire, no council, no archive had ever shown what really happened to Earth. They had buried it, burned the records, branded it unfortunate history, and moved on, but the Guardian had not. And now, the galaxy was being reminded. One image at a time. One truth at a time. One ghost at a time. The Guardian signals stopped. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. They simply ended. No more memories. No more echoes. Just silence. For a moment, the galaxy thought it was over, that whatever force had awakened had burned through its purpose and faded back into myth. The Council took comfort in the quiet. Reports were minimized. Panic cooled. Traders returned to their roots. Life resumed. But silence is rarely peace. In the outer system of Velthura, a small, independent world spun around a blue star. It was prosperous, wealthy, and old. Long ago, it had been one of Earth's closest allies, until the war. When the collapse began, Velthura switched sides. Quietly, efficiently. They handed over encrypted codes to the Council in exchange for protection and status. Earth never retaliated, but it remembered. And now, so did the Guardian. The fall of Velthura began without sound. No fleets approached. No weapons were fired. There were no scans, no alerts, no warnings. The stars above the planet simply began to dim. First, the outer sensor arrays failed. Engineers reported impossible readings. Gravity. Wells where there were no planets. Shadows moving in the emptiness. Then the orbital traffic systems went dark. Satellites failed. Comms went down. No one panicked. At first, it was just a technical failure, they told themselves. But then the lights across the capital city flickered. Not once. Not sporadically. They pulsed. In rhythm. And across every screen, terminal, and hollow, the image returned. The Guardian. Standing alone on the broken plains of Earth. Unmoving. Unblinking. Watching. Every system on Velthura froze. Engines failed. Shields collapsed. Nothing functioned. The power that held the world together simply vanished. Not destroyed, but taken. Then came the darkness. Total. Consuming. Suffocating. No sun. No stars. No sky. Just black. From orbit, automated recorders on nearby trade ships captured a sight no one could explain. The planet of Velthura, glowing briefly at its poles with soft blue light, then fading, as if swallowed by a curtain, and then it was gone. Not physically destroyed, but absent. The world remained in place, spinning silently, its cities intact, its infrastructure untouched, but its people were not there. No bodies, no wreckage, no smoke, just stillness. A world emptied, without war, without fire, without a single scream. And above it, in the upper atmosphere, something lingered for a while. A single ship, dark, silent. Its outline resembled no known design. Angular, yet graceful. Not made of metal, but something older. Worn. Alive. It hung there for hours, watching. Then, as silently as it came, it slipped away, into the void. Velthura's fall was never explained. The Council labeled it a system-wide catastrophe, a rare collapse of quantum infrastructure. The official report claimed a technical anomaly, but no one believed it. Not after the Guardian's image appeared again 2 days later, this time across 6 systems simultaneously. It bore no message, just a simple loop. A view from Velthura's Capitol Plaza. Empty streets, still wind, abandoned shoes, as if people had been walking one moment, and gone the next. And beneath it, a phrase. Memory retrieved. The galaxy erupted in fear. Worlds that had once mocked Earth sealed their borders. Governments declared emergency lockdowns. Ancient alliances crumbled as fingers pointed and old. Guilt resurfaced because no one knew where the Guardian would go next. But everyone remembered what they had done. Velthura had not been punished. It had been catalogued, its memory extracted. And if the Guardian was built to preserve Earth's story, then it would not stop with one world, because Earth had many memories, and the Guardian had only just begun. The second world didn't fall. It unraveled. No ships arrived. No signal warned of the Guardian's presence. There were no power failures, no missing populations, no spectacular vanishing like Velthura. Instead, people started to remember. It began with dreams. Citizens of Syros, a glittering metropolis world of wealth and influence, woke in terror, soaked in sweat, unable to speak. Some screamed, some cried, others just stared blankly for hours, repeating words they didn't understand. These weren't ordinary dreams. They were memories, but not their own. They dreamt of Earth's final hours. The firestorms over the Atlantic coast, the Martian bunkers cracking under orbital bombardment, the gasping, shaking voice of an old mother on Europa begging for someone, anyone, to answer her distress beacon. Each memory arrived whole and raw, not as fiction, but as lived truth. It didn't stop with dreams. Screens began to flicker with unauthorized broadcasts. Holograms displayed unfamiliar environments, human cities, human ships, human soldiers dying slow and unseen. Each image came with no commentary, no instruction. The citizens of Syros began to feel what it was like to be forgotten. And they broke. Hospitals overflowed with patients who could no longer distinguish their lives from the memories implanted in their minds. Leaders went silent. A council ambassador was found wandering the corridors of her estate, whispering Earth's old emergency codes. The Guardian hadn't fired a shot. It had simply shared. And that was enough to fracture an entire world. Syros didn't fall from attack. It fell from truth. And in that collapse, the galaxy began to see what the Guardian truly was. Not a destroyer, not a conqueror, but a mirror. A weapon forged not of steel or fire, but of memory everywhere the Guardian turned. It brought with it echoes, broken histories, buried files, the desperate pleas scrubbed from archives, the voices of children, soldiers, diplomats, all erased by time and rewritten by those who claimed Earth destroyed itself. Now those stories were being returned, one by one, injected directly into the hearts and minds of those who had looked away. Across the core worlds, panic surged. Some tried to block the Guardian's influence, jamming broadcasts, erecting memory firewalls, suppressing thought-linked tech. But it made no difference. The Guardian didn't need systems to deliver its payload. It only needed conscience. In some cases, that was enough. Entire governments began to dissolve. Officials resigned live on air. Veterans of the Earth War came forward with truths they had buried deep. Admissions of betrayal, of silence, of complicity. On one world, an entire academy held a moment of silence. Not in honor, in shame. Because every world that had once stood by as Earth collapsed now understood something they had never dared consider. They weren't innocent. They had watched it happen. They had let it happen. And now they had to live with that knowledge. One empire attempted to fight back. They built a counterweapon, a pulse that would erase neural pathways associated with traumatic memory. They tested it on volunteers. The result? Blank stares, drooling silence, permanent brain death, because the Guardians' memories weren't just data, they were real, and they had taken root. Not like poison, but like a seed. Somewhere deep, where regret grows. The Guardian continued its journey. It did not speak. It did not gloat. It simply moved from system to system, leaving behind nothing but truth. In doing so, it became the one thing no empire had ever prepared for. A story that couldn't be stopped, and the most terrifying part? It had not yet spoken a single word of its own. Everything the galaxy had seen, heard, and felt was from Earth. Earth's loss. Earth's pain. Earth's memory. The Guardian had no voice because it didn't need one. The stars themselves were speaking now, and what they said was simple. We let them die, and now we remember. The council met in secret. They always had when matters grew unstable. When wars threatened borders or a black hole swallowed a colony, they'd gather behind closed doors, high above the rest of the galaxy, and talk of balance, treaties, trade, but this time, no one spoke. Not at first. They sat in silence. 12 species, 12 voices that had once shaped the fates of entire civilizations. Now, they could barely lift their eyes. The air was heavy, not with fear of attack, but with something far worse. Accountability. For centuries, they had rewritten Earth's end, buried the facts, sealed the archives, told their people it was internal failure, the price of human arrogance. They had congratulated themselves on moving forward, building peace, rewriting history in the image of comfort. And then the Guardian returned. Not with accusations, but with proof. Every lie exposed. Every voice restored. Every truth replayed, until the galaxy could no longer deny what had been done. Not by a weapon, not by an enemy, but by neglect. The council leader, an elder from the longest-standing species, finally spoke. We must respond. We must acknowledge. Murmurs of agreement. Nods. But no one knew how. You can't make peace with a memory. You can't bargain with something that doesn't ask for your forgiveness. The Guardian hadn't demanded reparations. It hadn't issued threats. It had simply turned on the lights and forced them to look. And now, whole worlds were beginning to question the council itself. Across the stars, protests surged. Not for war, not for defense, but for the truth. Citizens demanded to see unredacted histories. They wanted to know what really happened, what their ancestors had signed, what their governments had allowed. And the answer, in every case, was the same. They let Earth die. The council voted to send emissaries, not diplomats, not warriors, witnesses. Their ships, marked in white and gray, colors of mourning, were dispatched toward the ruins of Sol, not to negotiate, but to kneel, to show that, finally, someone had come not to lecture, but to listen. The emissaries arrived at Earth's edge. The system was still quiet, still shielded, no fleets, no weapons visible, just a faint hum in the silence. The Guardian did not intercept them. It allowed them to enter. Their ships approached the ruined world, and there, orbiting Earth, they saw it. Not the Guardian itself, but what it had built. A monument, a ring of satellites, each one projecting a different voice. Thousands of them, children, engineers, poets, soldiers, parents, fragments of humanity's last days, looping in slow, solemn rhythm. Not for rage, for remembrance. The emissaries did not speak. They opened their ships to vacuum and stepped out in pressurized suits. And there, floating above the world their ancestors had betrayed, each one knelt in silence. No grand statement, No formal apology, just presence. That was the only thing they had left to offer. The Guardian didn't respond. It didn't need to. It had already made its point, and back in the Council's chamber, as word of the kneeling spread, something shifted. In the heart of galactic power. For the first time in centuries, the Council passed a resolution with no debate. Earth would no longer be erased. Its history would be restored. Its records opened. Its truth taught. Not to glorify, not to punish, but to remember. Because some legacies are not forged in triumph, some are carved into the stars by those who endured what no one else would. And the Guardian was still watching, not as a judge, but as a witness, to ensure no one ever forgot again. The voice came after the silence. Not immediately, not during the Council's kneeling, not during the protests or the rewriting of records. It came later, when the galaxy had grown still again. Not from fear this time, but from reverence, and perhaps that was why the Guardian chose that moment, because what it had waited for, more than apologies, was understanding. It began like all the signals before it. Dark screens, a quiet hum, and then a voice, not booming, not robotic, not grand, just human, tired, calm, resolute. You remembered. No other words followed. Just that. 3 seconds. Later, the screen lit with stars. Real-time footage of the galaxy itself, turning slowly in the black. Systems blooming with light. Trade lanes stretching between worlds. Civilization still thriving. Then came images of Earth. Not in ruins, but in memory. Families beneath sunsets. Children at school. Scientists at consoles. Soldiers standing, not in battle, but in ceremony, moments, not glory, not power, just being. The Guardian spoke again. You did not save us. A pause. Heavy. Measured. But now you know what was lost. The screen changed again. This time, a list. A long one. Not names, coordinates. Planets, moons, stations. Every location where a betrayal had occurred. Every signature of silence. Every place where Earth had asked for help and been denied. Then those coordinates faded, replaced by a new map. One the galaxy had never seen before. These were not worlds of shame. They were preserved sites, archives, truth holds, seeds of memory planted centuries ago by Earth's last engineers. Systems where beacons had been buried, waiting for the day when the truth could be accepted. Not denied, not twisted, but received. You tried to forget, the voice said, but we planted our memory in the dirt, in stone, in signal, in silence, and then, for the first time in recorded galactic history, the Guardian showed itself fully. The projection was impossible, simultaneous, visible in orbit around every major world. Not a weapon, not a fleet, a single figure, tall, humanoid, neither machine nor flesh, but both. A face that was too still, too knowing. A body that had carried weight far heavier than steel. Its eyes held stars. Its voice returned. I was made not to avenge Earth. I was made to keep it from vanishing. A silence. Then, you feared us because we were loud. We were angry. We were too fast, too stubborn. But you misunderstood us. We never wanted your empire. We only wanted our place in the stars. We wanted to matter. And when you took that from us, we became a memory. The projection shifted to a single image. A child's hand holding a broken toy, standing in the dust of a destroyed street. No face, no tears, just waiting. The Guardian's voice softened. I waited for hope, but hope died, and so I rose. A soft vibration passed through every device, every vessel, every listening post. Not a command, not an alert, just a heartbeat. And now, I rest. Across every system, The projections blinked out. No explosion, no shutdown, just gone. In Seoul, the Guardian stood at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, not flying, drifting, watching the planet it had sworn to protect. It had fulfilled its task. Humanity, though gone, was no longer erased. Its truth had been returned. Its voice had been heard. Its silence had been honored. The Guardian turned slowly, its sensors fading, power cells cycling down, its form still tall, still proud, but no longer burdened, not needed, not anymore, because it had never been Earth's wrath. It had been Earth's memory, and now the stars themselves carried that memory forward, in schools, in stories, in the eyes of those who had once been taught to look away, and now looked back, with respect. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, a statue was built, not of a hero, not of the Guardian, of Earth. No weapons, no flames, just a globe, blue, cracked, beautiful. Beneath it, an inscription in Old Earth English. We were here. No empire lasts forever. No species remains untouched by time. But some leave echoes so powerful, so precise, that they become impossible to silence. Earth had fallen, but it had not vanished. Because as long as one voice remembers, no one is ever truly lost.